I'm going to show you guys how to use ownership, game theory, and roster construction to play DraftKings and FanDuel golf like a pro. We're starting right now. What's up, guys? Joe Holka here. Welcome to another daily fantasy sports and betting video. If this is your first time here and you want to become a profitable DraftKings player and get better at betting, start now by subscribing to the channel. Make sure you click that notification bell so you don't miss anything along the way. If you're already a Holkamaniac, you know that the best thing you can do at this point, smash that like button. We'll get started, guys. Kind of an interesting question came up, and we ended up asking the group, is there ever an ownership level where a player becomes an auto fade in large field tournaments?
You got the expensive guys like JT, and he's going to be, 28 to 32% owned. That's depending on the contest. That's not really a fade for me. So when it gets down lower and the guy's like 30% or over 25, then yeah, that would probably be an auto fade. Like if he's a $7,200 like industry wide value in GPPs, I'd probably just pivot somewhere else.
Before Gup goes here, I have a question. So like some sports, like there's ownership that like really doesn't really get past like 30% or so, but then we have like NBA where it's not that uncommon to see a guy hit like 60, 70. Is golf like that as well, or normally do we not see guys reach that range?
No.
I think the max you see around golf is what around. I mean, I've seen like 40% where something
Okay.
like with when you have like DJ it as with dominant course history, they'll go up to 40%. But like I think it's rare to see like anything in that 40% above range.
That's good to know because I think it actually like really affects leverage in general. Like I know in NHL, like honestly, I think people get too contrarian at times because you're not really leveraging a ton if like the chalk stack of the night is like 20%. So I'm always kind of interested in how that is different for different sports. So Gup, is there a kind of ownership range that is this an auto fade for you, or are you kind of on the same page as Drew that it just totally depends?
Yeah, so I correlate it back to my expected value. So if it's, say, Scott Piercy this week's catching fire because of his course history and he loves this course and he tweets about this course and I have him at an expected value of X, and then all of a sudden his ownership's 18%, which could be 1.5 to 2 times what I think he should be in the field, then that could be a fade or a pivot for me because it's just not worth me to go up to that. And that could be any price level, so there'll be, because the way I build, I don't look at ownership as much, because if I'm doing a 5 max deal, well, if I have a guy 2 of my 5 lineups, he's automatically 40% for
Absolutely.
me. And so I more look at how I think the rest of the field's going to build, but I think I do mass entries, especially when I'm hoping PGA eventually gets where they have a lot better, not milli maker every week. That'd be awesome, but something close to that. But when they do have the milli maker, I'm in it and I max that. And so I had that strategy, and I definitely would look, I have a way where I'll look at the price range and I'll fade on ownership based on the rest of the group in that deal. And I'll also jump on people because of that. So if this week, Snedeker was pretty popular last week, kind of like Tambo said earlier. And then now you look at projections and I don't know if I could get him above 10%, probably 6 to 8% this week. Well, at his price range with who he's around, I may jump on him just from he's there. I think he's still a good play, but now I'm getting leverage on the rest of the people around him. So that's where I would look at the ownership side.
And then when it comes to the chalk, I'm less likely to fade the chalk at the top. If it's a guy that I really like that week, I'll eat the chalk. But anytime we get really chalky guys down in the 6-7K range on DraftKings, golf is such a volatile sport, and especially when you're not a top-tier golfer, that anytime a guy is going to be more than 15% owned, I'll just automatically cross them off my list unless it's like an extreme value that you can't pass up on.
Yeah, that was kind of that actually went right into my biggest question was like I think that the chalk at the value side of things versus expensive chalk is probably something that you have to think about too. So I always want to kind of like at least throw some parallels out there to NFL. So what it sounds like is if there's this like super thin cheap wide receiver or cheap tight end that like everyone's on, it makes a sense in tournaments to kind of pivot away from that situation just because some of these guys that maybe don't have a high percentage to hit the cut but are super low or high owned based on probably what their salary is or based on their long-term form. It seems like
it's like when like Rashard Higgins is chalk in NFL. That
and you
dude's
just know
like,
the week's going to be brutal.
Well, he's just 0% to be a good tournament play at like 30% or whatever. And the same thing is, and like this will happen 20 times during the course of the PGA season where some guy's 7.8K and he's like playing where he played at college, or he like has like 3 T5s in a row, or some something will influence ownership for like, I'm not even, Siwoo Kim, some tournament will be projected at like 19% ownership or something, and he'll just be an egregious play at that ownership.
Yeah, Davis, expand a little bit on ownership before we move on from that. Like, is this a sport where you're playing at least a little bit of chalk? Are you really trying to get contrarian and get to the top? And is that the best way to kind of get to the top?
Well, the chalk that you probably want to be eating is like the expensive guys, whether it be like you take a stance on like Dustin Johnson over Rory McIlroy, or like Hideki over Jason Day or something like that. Because just the way that golf player pools are built, like the expensive guys are just never going to get below a certain ownership threshold just because
Sure.
of how the rosters shake out. Like, there's no multi-position. It's everyone's just in the one spot. And then, yeah, like, what basically the whole method is what Drewby explained, which is trying to make similarly priced pivots for guys who project similarly, but getting massive ownership discounts. So when that hits, you're getting an edge, as opposed to like having very similar and non-unique roster construction.
By the way, if you've ever found value in any of my videos or live streams, one of the best ways to support what I'm doing here for free is to go over to Twitter, give me the follow, and then if you're new to the community, definitely do a ton of content exclusive to Instagram as well. So take a few seconds if you can, follow me over there, we'd really appreciate it. This might be the most important thing that we've learned this entire journey together, and it's that DFS pricing is relatively efficient based on Vegas lines, and DFS ownership is far from efficient.
I think that people play too much chalk generally in PGA DFS, especially in large field tournaments. And that's where I kind of want to separate it a little bit. Cash games, you might be able to win some weeks with like 4 of 6 guys getting through the cut. 5 of 6, you're looking pretty strong, and you're definitely winning with 6 of 6. In tournaments, you're not going to, like, unless you get 6 of 6, you're barely going to sniff a min cash. And so you're going to need the winner. You're going to need all 6 golfers through the cut. And then if you're playing the super large field tournaments, you're also going to need those guys to all finish inside the top 20. And it just becomes something that's really hard to hit that optimal kind of lineup. And I've found that the pricing is very efficient and DFS ownership is not efficient. Looking at kind of studying the average performances over the previous couple of years, in general, the Vegas odds and DFS pricing generally groups people roughly where they should be, but the DFS market always kind of overreacts and over-owns certain guys. So if you're able to get guys that have comparable odds to finish inside the top 20, but I'm able to get them at 5% ownership, you play them at 20%, then I'm basically getting 4-1 on the price. And over the long run, that stuff's going to add up.
So these type of percentages at Daily Roto, looking at like top 20, top 5% to win, is that kind of what you're saying with like trying to get guys at lower ownership that has a similar projection or a similar percentage of a chance to finish in the top 20?
Exactly. So I create this like leverage score, basically taking the top 20 odds minus the ownership to try to identify the guys that could still be strong values. And oftentimes it still tells you that like a 20% guy, 20% owned guy, which seems high, he might be one of the highest 5 owned players of the tournament, but he's still a pretty good value to finish inside the top 20. And so that would be an example where it's a pretty good play. In other cases, you have a guy that maybe is 50-50 to miss the cut, and he's going to be one of the highest owned players. And those seem like pretty easy situations where you should be looking for a pivot. Ultimately, the best weeks I've always had have been, you're going to get a few weeks a year where the field only gets like 1% of lineups have 6 of 6 guys through the cut. And so if you're able to get 10% of your lineups through on that week, and you're able to sacrifice the weeks where maybe the field gets 20%, then over the long run, that puts you in a much better position to finish towards the top end. Yeah, and just to clarify for the folks who haven't played a lot of PGA DFS, like we're not really talking about playing guys who are 1% owned here. Typically, you're looking at like the guys who are the top 20 favorites in the tournament. They're mostly all of them are going to carry 10% ownership. So we're talking like difference between 10 and 30% ownership more so than throwing darts. I would say in general, like I try to draw a line. If a guy doesn't have 15% odds to finish inside the top 20, I'll kind of like slap him out of my player pool. And then just the slate size matters a lot too in the tournaments that you're playing. In some of the tournaments, like a small field, $1,500 buy-in, you just need 6 of 6 through the cut and you're live to win that tournament. And so what you need from the cheap guy there, it's a lot more likely that the chalk is going to pay off there than it is when you're playing the millionaire maker and all your guys have to finish inside the top 20. That's such an unlikely performance from any golfer. So I think that ignoring the value guys and fading them more in the large field tournaments is definitely profitable.
good chalk versus bad chalk, like you talked about. Typically in golf, the good chalk is the more expensive chalk. They're the studs for a reason. JT this week is in a field that has almost nobody in it. If you want to call Spieth the stud still these days, I'm cheering for him this week. But just give you an idea, it's a worse field. So JT is better off. So I don't care what he's really owned. If anything, I probably want to get him 60% if I'm going to max out at that percentage for my entire pool, because I know he's going to be 30 to 35%. As far as getting contrarian goes, I mean, golf has the highest recency bias of any sport. I play most of the sports, NFL and golf the most diligently, but the other sports, this sport has more recency bias than you'll ever see. One guy has one bad Saturday, Sunday, the weekend before, and the next week, all of a sudden, his ownership drives to the bottom. He's not a bad golfer. Like this week, I guarantee Patrick Reed won't be owned nearly at all. But last week, he's a hero in Hawaii. He's so good at that course. All of a sudden, he doesn't translate, but the stats won't say it. As Gut mentioned, everyone goes on to the same podcast. They see the same stats on the same models. You're not going to have anything different. You're going to have the same lineup as everybody else. You're not going to leverage the field at all.
Before we jump back in, if you like my work and you want to support my work, the number one way you can do so for free is by bookmarking my Amazon link and using it in your day-to-day shopping. What you buy literally doesn't matter as long as my link brings you to the site. You're doing your part to support the channel. So let me know in the comments as well if you decide to join the Amazon crew. I'll definitely give you a shout out on the next video. One of my favorite tips, basically across any DFS sport, is one of the best ways to use game theory to be unique in tournaments is just to have a different roster construction than the field. A lot of times there'll be tons of good plays at the high end, at the low end, and just being kind of unique through roster construction of maybe having a mid-range team gives you a lot of leverage on the field. So we talked a little bit about that as well. So Gup, you mentioned just that you think one of your biggest or your largest edges is in roster construction. So like, what does it actually take to win a GPP at different sizes, different entry levels? Like, expand on kind of your building techniques a little bit.
Well, it's separate from football. I mean, with golf, the first thing, the difference obviously we've talked about is virtually every single week you have to get 6 to 6. And so, it's kind of like a part 1 and a part 2 of tournament is when you're trying to build is, especially like if you're doing a 3 max or even, like the 333, I think it's a 15 max this week. I may not put 15 in there. I may feel with my history, I can put 3 to 5 in and still be plus EV going into the contest. And so in that, some guys will go and they said they may build 3 different bullets and go, this is my high ceiling lineup, low ceiling lineup, average lineup. I don't really do that. I really just kind of what Drew was just saying. I really try to tighten down my core of my players to where I want to get to for the week. And then I just look for the spots where I'm a big play the guys you like to an extent. And so I look for the edges elsewhere. So if I'm up top and I'm close between JT, DeChambeau, and Woodland this week, I may put all 3 of them 1-1-1.
Sure.
And then I think a lot of guys fear making their core in the middle or lower price guys as opposed to that high where I don't really care. If I have, Ches Reavie this week, I just make someone up, and he's high in my model and I think he may do well. And I put him in 2 of the 3 lineups and he makes the cut and he's, $7,600 or something like that. That gives me some advantage where I'm building elsewhere. The terms you'll hear is balanced lineup, stars and scrubs in golf. And I think that can come into play. So if you decide to go way up high with 2 guys and then you think you can pick 2 guys down low, that gives you an edge, that can give you big edge on the field because most guys may be scared to go at a $6,500 Fabian Gomez this week, especially in a 333. But if you take that edge and it pays off, then you're already ahead. I lean more towards playing and building the team that I think will do the best overall.
The stats are there for a reason. I just use them totally differently. In a sense of I let all these smart wizards like Colin go and do the data figuring out. Like, that's not me. I don't do that. And I barely know English. So I go on and I do my own thing. Like I want to use something like a Fantasy Golf National, use them as an example, or Daily Roto or whoever has these sites out there. I want to use those stats, let other people figure them out for me. And then I want to use them for ownership. I watch golf. I spend a lot of time watching golf, interviews, players, reading everything possible. And for me, it's more about things like motivation factors. right? If a guy has to go out and win this week, Ian Poulter at the Houston Open last year, I don't care if he's a GPP play, a cash play, whatever you say he is. I know what the golfer he is, and he's capable. I'll die on that hill. I don't need a stats model to tell me that you can't play him in cash this week because whatever reason. I don't follow those metrics to a T. I use what other people tell me. I piece it together, and it's way more about lineup construction and motivation factors for me. I still want to have something a little bit tighter, especially with my core, and I expanded a little bit different depending on how I feel about the guy at the top. On a week like this, still full field event with a cut, but I talked about it earlier where I think JT is just well beyond the field. I'm going to be overweight. I might have JT 60%, where the field will have him 35. If he does what I think he's going to do, I want it to pay off for me, and I'll get different everywhere else. If it's an event like the Masters, where every guy seemingly good, besides the 10 that you can cut off out of the gate that just sort of show up type thing, or the older guys and whatnot, then you do it a little bit differently, right? Then I want to change it up because I want to have a little bit more balanced. I might want to go after a smaller area or a core. And then back to what Drew said too about, he said sort of there's a mention of, there's something to be said for going the opposite of the group, like the same as contrarian in any sport. It's the same with the game theory of how the lineups are being built. If you can tell everyone this week is building JT lineups, like I just said, I am even. The other portion, I may switch up completely and drop, the first 4 guys off the top and start with a completely balanced build because I know most of the rosters are going to be starting with JT, and that's how I get different that way.
Man, I love that point just because I think so many people think that being contrarian a lot of times just means like you end up on these super thin plays in any sport. And a lot of times like just having a different roster construction just leads you to something that's more unique in general. You don't really have to do a lot. You can still play good plays. It just having a different roster construction, I think, is something across sports that people could do to be contrarian in a smart way. A ton of people have already taken advantage of this already, and it's been a lot of fun. But if you're looking to invest in yourself and take your game to the next level, I do offer one-on-one coaching. So definitely check out a little bit more information over at joeholka.com/coaching. But if you prefer to continue to just learn in a group setting, I definitely appreciate you guys as well. But what a lot of people don't realize is if they have an Amazon Prime account, and a lot of people do, they already automatically have access to a Twitch Prime subscription. So with that, you get access to our premium Discord chat, as well as a bunch of other subscriber-only perks. And regardless, guys, if you're not taking advantage of these live streams, you're definitely doing yourself a disservice. So definitely give me the follow over on Twitch as well, twitch.tv/joeholka, so you don't miss anything. With the way prize pools are structured these days, it's never been more important to have unique lineups. So I think the best way to kind of be contrarian and give yourself that challenge of getting a unique lineup is just a little bit of salary on the table. So we dug into that strategy a little bit now.
For my style, playing in like a $5 150 max, I want to have as much volatility in there as I can get because I'm still trying to get someone in the chat asked about leaving money on the table.
Yeah,
right. It's just a different strategy that you're going after. I'm looking to leverage guys. I might flip a coin and just play a guy. This one's cliche, but it goes around a lot. But if I know this week Gary Woodland's going to be 20% owned, and these aren't real numbers, but he's 10,800. And Spieth is 10,300, and Spieth is going to be 5% owned. Those aren't accurate. It's going to be a lot closer than that. But just using it as the example, it's the same as 4-1 odds that you're giving me. If you give me a head-to-head right now and say 4-1, I don't even care if they just both woke up at a bed. I'm playing Spieth because the odds are in my favor there. So I'm going to utilize that, and I'm going to leverage it in GPPs to try and get ahead of the pack and just be well ahead of them. Leaving money on the table.
Yep.
And there's we'll get into this probably at some point with correlations. We can talk about it. But as far as the generality of it, it's an individual sport. So in a football lineup, if I can get up from Chris Conley to Tyreek Hill with that money, I'm going to do that. I know that it could still be contrarian to keep down at Conley, but I look at Tyreek Hill, what he has the upside to break the slate. Conley doesn't. I want to use that money. In golf, on any given week, Woodland at 8,000 can outdo DJ at 12,000. That's $4,000. So no matter what you did, he scored more points. You could have left $4,000 on the table and had Woodland over DJ. I know it's not optimal going in. That's hindsight, but I'm just saying a reason why you can leave more money on the table than some might think. There's strategy behind it.
Colin, what are your thoughts on spending the entire cap and correlation in particular? I think that's one topic that we've had some kind of back and forth about like maybe correlating with guys that drive the ball along on certain courses would make some sense, correlating guys based on what time they're teeing off. So is that a real thing? And what do you think about leaving salary on the table?
As far as correlation goes, I think the only one, and it's something that we didn't really talk about at all for basics, is the role of weather. So the only kind of factors that golfers do play under different conditions depending on time of the day, because the way they stagger tee times is the guys who tee off Thursday in the AM go Friday PM, and then Thursday PM go Friday AM. And just due to random variations in weather, you can get guys who will have more or less average wind during their time. And like that's realistically the only way you can create correlations for yourself, is getting guys who are all playing in the same weather conditions.
Right.
It should go without saying, but just because we didn't cover it yet, like windier is bad for scoring environments, and high temperature is actually really good. If you want a rough equivalency, I would guess that for every 2 degrees of temperature differential, it's equivalent to 1 degree of wind differential for tee times. So
that's good. So
I think weather is realistically the only correlation that you're going to get. As far as the concept of leaving money on the table and keeping ownership low, like we're always trying to keep ownership low regardless of what sport we're playing. And I think you get a lot more bang for your buck, I think, in golf, especially around the millionaire maker, around the Masters. Because when you get a lot more casual money, it's something like over 50% of lineups like reach the cap in the Millie Maker.
Yeah.
And because there's so much of your equity is tied up in top heavy payouts, you need to avoid duplicate lineups like the plague, and just making sure that you don't spend everything, or don't spend all the cap, is the easiest defense you have against your lineup getting duped.
Yeah, I think Noto mentioned that even just going down to like leaving like 300 on the table was like a drastic difference between leaving 100 or leaving 200 on the table too. So something to think about for sure. One of the best ways to find sleepers and kind of use game theory to your advantage in PGA DFS is really to just embrace the variance. Guys, you really want to be benefiting from the chaos. If things are going nuts, if the chalk is not hitting, how does that help you get to the top? And that's how I really want you guys to continue to think about this. And we're going to dive into that a little bit now. Drew, what are your thoughts on like wind, weather? Like are you even paying attention to that kind of thing when you're building your teams? Like when people are kind of expected to tee off versus other parts of the field? Like, are you building groups that way in MME, that type of thing? I guess it's something I'm still kind of piecing my head through.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something to be said for being contrarian and going the flip side of those waves.
Sure.
But yeah, generally speaking, like I kind of fall in the range of single entry, 3 max, and then I'll run a really small pool of MME, nothing like Tyler. So generally speaking, I'm pretty tight on my core, and I'll find guys that have the best chance. Like they'll have the favorable weather. I don't really try to get too cute and flip it. It kind of worked out this last year in the British Open. I think the wind was supposed to be nasty, like AM, PM for Thursday and then Friday. And guys that stacked the PM, AM actually played better. It wasn't much of a stroke difference, but like just going to those guys that were going to be, half the ownership, and for the most part, I mean, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that from a strict mathematical, like a rigorous statistical approach, the data golf way, I think, is clearly superior, where really all that they're trying to do is look at adjusted scoring based on the fields that these guys are in. But like with everything in DFS, I think there is a little bit of an art to it. And some of the edges are things that are, and some of the edges and some of the things that you can exploit are not always things that are going to show up exactly in the data, or things that the data would kind of laugh at. Like, for example, Zach Johnson finishes 3rd every year at the John Deere, and Bubba Watson is like in the top 5 at the Travelers Championship every year. Mm-hmm. And I'm positive that those guys Zach Johnson will be priced that way at the John Deere, but Bubba probably won't at the Travelers. And like, those are pieces of information that you can use to like help make decisions on. Like, there's some courses where guys just do well every year, and that's something that I would weight. That's something I would use in my decision making, that Drew B and probably other people who are much more strict to like the adjusted scoring, probably like it just doesn't factor into the decision making at all.
Yeah, man. Hashtag field game, I guess.
Hashtag. I will say PGA much less of a field game than NFL is.
Yeah, just don't be a chalk donkey. I think it's going to put you in a better position any given week to have six guys make the cut. But over the long run, it's going to be hard to take down tournaments. And ultimately, if you're not winning tournaments, it's going to be hard to be successful in DFS. So definitely try to focus on at least having 2 or 3 contrarian elements to your team. Focus on the right game selection and the right tournaments. And I think that you'll be able to turn a nice profit.
If you want to learn how to become a profitable daily fantasy sports player and get better at betting, start now by hitting the subscribe icon in the bottom right-hand corner so you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.